So going ahead from here, we look at the next aspect, and that is the truss analogy. We need to understand how the shear behaves and how various members come into action and how the stirrups would be taking the load, how much load it will be taking. So let us understand that, and in order to understand this, let us go back about a century and a little more back when this research was done and a theory was proposed. That theory was truss analogy model. So as I have mentioned right in the beginning when we have started this chapter, that what we are using is a simplified version, okay, or a conventional version. Now all this is based on the truss analogy model. Now there are other models also which have been developed lately, but even now this is in practice. So let us understand this particular truss analogy model. This truss analogy model was introduced by a Swiss engineer, W. Ritter, that was in 1899, and then it was a little modified by a German engineer, Morsch, in 1908. Now as per this truss analogy, there is a truss which has been created with angles of 45 degrees. All joints are pin jointed, and based on this we can easily calculate, I would use the word easily, we would be able to calculate what are the forces in different members. So in order to make our life easier in calculating the forces, different forces, we resort to this. Now there is half beam shown over here. Now that's the beam. We know that there is a point load and there could be other loads. So there is a reaction. We know that there is a reaction. Now when there is a reaction, the top zone over here is in compression. The top zone is in compression. The bottom zone over here is in tension, and obviously over here there is a longitudinal bar, longitudinal reinforcement to take care of the flexural tension already provided over here. That is what we notice. Now this portion is all concrete. We all know that this is concrete, and these are the shear reinforcements or the stirrups which we have provided. So looking at this particular structure, it looks like a truss wherein the angles are 45 degrees. Each joint is pin jointed. It is a pin at each of the joints. We understand that the bottom one, the bottom member, the longitudinal reinforcement is in tension. Now in this case also it is in tension. The top chord over here, we need not have a reinforcement over here, but the top chord is in compression. The concrete over here is in compression, so the compressive force forms this top chord. Obviously this is the concrete. The concrete is forming part of the strut. It is in compression, this is in compression, this is in compression. So all these are in compression, and the concrete is good in compression. It takes care of this particular force which comes in the diagonal manner, and this over here would be the tension. These members are always in tension. That tension is being taken care of by the stirrups. So this truss has been developed, truss model has been developed by Swiss engineer W. Ritter. Now according to this model, it was assumed that after cracking of concrete, the RC member behaved similar to a truss with top longitudinal chord made up of concrete resisting compression, the bottom chord formed of longitudinal flexural steel to resist tension, that is this one, the vertical stirrups taking the tension, that is this, and the concrete inclined at 45 degrees, that is this concrete, resisting the compression. So that becomes the strut over there. So this was the model proposed by Ritter. Obviously over here this is concrete in compression, the steel in tension over here, these are the stirrups, and these all portions showing us the struts, that is those which are formed by the concrete over there. Then Morsch slightly changed it and gave a better explanation to this. The top longitudinal chord made up of the concrete resisting compression, that is the top one over here, the bottom chord here longitudinal tension, this taking tension, and these all taking the compression. Now over here all the external loads are assumed to be acting at the nodes. All these pin jointed nodes, the external acting loads are assumed to be acting over there. And whenever we have a truss like this, we know that the angle is 45 degrees. By using the principles of mechanics, this truss can be solved. All the components can be solved. The vertical component of the diagonal tension is used to design the stirrups. So the vertical component of the diagonal tension is used to design the stirrups, and the longitudinal tensiles, this longitudinal tensile steel resists the horizontal component of the diagonal tension. So wherever there is diagonal tension developed, this takes the vertical component, horizontal component is taken care of by the longitudinal steel. Now these are in compression, as I have discussed earlier. Now the height of this truss, this is very important, the height of this truss is equal to the lever arm between the compression force and the tension force. In the previous chapter, when we were deriving the formula for the flexure, at that time we had understood that there is compressive force above the neutral axis, it acts as a resultant, and there is tensile force in the steel, the tension zone in the steel, there is tensile force. The moment was generated between the T, capital T, that is a tensile force resultant, and the capital C, that is compression force resultant. The distance between these two resultants is the lever arm. So now this distance is very important. So this is the distance between this point and this point is that particular distance, that is the lever arm. So the height of the truss is equal to the lever arm between the two forces, that is compressive force and the tensile force. Now the truss panel length, that is each panel length from here to here, the distance between the adjacent vertical members of the truss is equal to Z, that is the lever arm, cot 45 degrees. Now please note over here it is Z into cot 45 degrees because this is 45 degrees. So it is Z into cot 45 degrees, but cot 45 is 1. So this distance also becomes equal to Z. In this case it becomes equal to Z. The truss analogy model assumes that all the stirrups crossing an inclined plane over the horizontal distance of Z cot 45 degrees are grouped together to form one vertical member or stirrup. What happens over here is, in this it is assumed that these two are assumed to be acting as one, these two are assumed to be acting as one, similarly these two are assumed to be acting in one. So that is the assumption which has been done over here. So for 2 over here we show one stirrup, for 2 over here there is one stirrup over here, and these two diagonal, likewise all the diagonal concrete members forming the struts are grouped together as one member. So 2 of these form one member. So that's how we get this particular rectangle over here. Okay, so one forming of these two, one of these two, and the diagonal are also grouped together to form this. So that's the assumption which we do. So that's how we get the truss. The truss panel length, the distance between the adjacent vertical members of the truss is equal to Z cot 45 degrees or is equal to Z. So whatever is this depth over here, please note the compressive force is here, the tensile force is here, compressive force in this is here, tensile force in this is here. This Z is equal to this Z over here. That is what we find because cot 45 is 1. So that's how we have got this. Now moving further, we have understood that the concrete contribution VUC is considered to be a result of force transfer of dowel action of the longitudinal fracture steel, aggregate interlock along the diagonal crack, and the uncracked concrete beyond the end of the crack. Let me tell you, this is what we have understood earlier, that the total VUC is made up of different parameters. One of them is longitudinal steel which is there over here, which will be giving the dowel action. There would be the aggregate interlock, that is we have seen it as VAC, and then there is uncracked concrete. So total it is, but it is so complex that it is very difficult to assess the actual proportion of what is resisting how much. Therefore, in order to simplify this, what is done is the load resisted by concrete when there is no reinforcement in the beam, the load resisted by the concrete due to diagonal cracking when there is no shear reinforcement provided, no reinforcement in the sense no shear reinforcement is provided, that is considered, and that is taken to be equal to shear strength of the concrete. That is this is the simplification which has been done. As mentioned in the previous lectures, the simplified procedures and assumptions have shaped up the design for shear. So one of the simplification is this: a concrete beam is taken, it does not have any shear reinforcement, it is tested, and due to diagonal cracking, when the beam has cracked, how much force, how much capacity it has, that has been taken directly as the capacity of concrete. But in any case, the truss analogy presents a very simple model for behavior of RCC beams with shear reinforcement. So because of truss analogy, we can easily design the beams for shear. But what are the limitations for this truss analogy method? As discussed earlier, in this method it is extremely difficult to model the interface shear and dowel shear forces. How to model it, how much magnitude of force it will be taking, extremely difficult to model it and to understand how much it is. Second thing is that deformation in the beam due to shear cannot be calculated based on this truss mechanism. Deformation cannot be calculated because there is so much of strain incompatibility. As we have discussed earlier, strain compatibility is because of different parameters, non-homogeneity. So as a result, this truss analogy becomes irrelevant or less relevant at ultimate load level. Now let us understand the shear reinforcement. Now that we have understood that the vertical shear reinforcement which is provided is taking up the tension, the vertical component of the diagonal tension, as we have already said. Now as per the truss analogy model, the nominal shear capacity Vn of the beam with transverse reinforcement is understood to be equal to the sum of the contributions of uncracked concrete, that is VOC, and that of stirrups. So Vn is equal to, that is the nominal shear capability, nominal shear capacity is equal to VUC, that is contribution of uncracked concrete, plus VUS, that is of the stirrups. Now we call it VUS, the IS code calls it as VS. So let us look at the things positively over here. So VUC is the nominal shear resistance provided by the concrete. So VUC is tau C into BD, as we have already discussed this earlier. So VUC is tau C into BD, and VUS is the nominal shear resistance of the shear reinforcement. Now in the truss model, the crack is assumed to be formed at an angle of 45 degrees to the neutral axis. Hence, the horizontal distance of the component of the crack is about the length of one effective depth D. This we have already discussed earlier based on the sketch. So now consider the vertical stirrup with total area of its legs. Say there are two legs, so it will be multiplied 2 times. So total area becomes ASV, being placed or spaced at a distance of SV. Say that is the spacing SV. So the number of stirrups traversed by the crack, the number of stirrups cut by the cracks would be D upon SV. The distance divided by the spacing. So distance, if I'm considering as 1 meter divided by spacing, I will be knowing how many number of cracks, how many number of stirrups the cracks would be cutting through. So if the stress in the stirrups is equal to the design yield stress, that is 0.87 Fy, then the shear resistance of the vertical stirrups would be VUS is equal to the stress into the area and number of the bars cut. How many bars are cut by the crack multiplied by the area multiplied by the stress. Stress into area is the force multiplied by the number of bars. So that gives me the capability of the shear stirrups to resist the force. Therefore we get Vn, that is the shear capability of the beam, is tau CBD, that is the uncracked beam capability, uncracked concrete capability, plus that of the stirrups, 0.87 Fy ASV into d upon SV. So for equilibrium, this Vn capability, shear resisting capability, should be equal to the external acting ultimate load. So external acting shear force ultimate should be equal to the nominal shear capacity of the beam. Or we can have over here Vu, which is tau V into Bd, will be equal to tau C Bd plus 0.87 F by ASV d upon SV. That's how we get it. Now immediately let us look at the design procedure. So if at all we have to solve the problems, what is the procedure we would be looking at? The procedure is, generally the design procedure for shear is done after the flexural design is completed. The design for flexure is completed. That means we have already decided what would be the width of the beam, the effective depth, the overall depth, grade of concrete, the grade of steel. Then we would be doing the calculations, finding the neutral axis, finding the capability, that is mu limiting, and then finally we are arriving to how much steel we are providing. Okay, so we know all that. We also are aware of, when we have started, what are the loads coming on the beam, what is the effective span, what is the type of the beam, whether it is simply supported, cantilever, overhang, continuous, whatever. So all these data before coming to a shear design is already known to us, because we have already designed the first part, that is the flexural design. Now in the design procedure for shear with vertical stirrups, first step is calculate the value of Vu, the ultimate shear force which is coming. As we have discussed, the shear force is maximum at the support, so reaction we take directly and then we find Vu. If it is at any other place in the beam, you have to locate where it is, find the value of V, then get the value of Vu and then design accordingly. Having got the value of Vu, the step number 2 is calculate the value of tau V. Tau V is the nominal shear stress coming on the beam. Tau V is given by Vu upon effective depth and effective width. That is the cross-sectional area. That is the force, the shear force, ultimate shear force upon the cross-sectional area. Step number 3, find the value of tau C max from table number 20. That is page number 73. This is the maximum value of shear or maximum value of shear stress the concrete can take, the concrete can have, limiting shear stress the concrete has. That is given in the tabulation on page number 73. Now compare tau C max and tau V. Whatever value we have got from here, compare them with tau V. If tau C max is less than tau V, that means if tau V, the shear stress, the nominal shear stress coming is more than the capability of the beam, redesign the section. As we have discussed earlier, redesign means either change or increase the B or the D or B and D, or change the improve the grade of concrete. That could be done, and as a result we will have to design it right from the beginning and then proceed with this design. Step number 5, if this is not true, that is if tau C max is greater than tau V or tau V is less than tau C max, find the value of tau C, find the value of its own shear resisting capability. Now in order to find this, we know that based on whatever research has been done, we know that the IS code has given us based on the grade of concrete and how much steel has been provided at that section, and the steel continues further towards the support by at least 1 D from the section considered. So from that, based on that, we find the value of tau C. Having got the value of tau C, now compare tau C with tau V. Earlier we had compared tau C max and tau V. Now we are comparing tau C and tau V. Having compared tau V and tau C, if tau V is less than tau C, if the external acting shear stress is less than the capability of the beam, or it is maximum equal to the capability of the beam, then the code says provide minimum shear reinforcement. This is what we have already seen earlier. So provide minimum shear reinforcement as per this clause, and then provide the spacing, maximum spacing as per this. So whatever is the minimum answer of spacing we are getting from here and here, that is the one which we are going to use for design. We are going to say that this is the value. Now look at it. If the value of tau V goes more than the capability of the beam, earlier we had a condition when the tau v was less than the capability of the beam. Now the value of tau v is greater than the capability of the beam. Then it says assume the diameter of the shear stirrups, because now we are supposed to design for the shear stirrups. Earlier it was only minimum shear which we have provided and the spacing we have taken care of. Now over here we have to provide the shear stirrups by designing. So assume the diameter of the shear stirrups and the number of legs, how many legs would be there. So based on that, calculate the VUS, the VU, the load the shear stirrups is supposed to take. Now how much is the balance load the shear stirrups is supposed to take? The balance load the shear stirrups will have to take is the ultimate load minus the capability of the beam. Ultimate load, that is VU, the ultimate reaction which is VU, minus tau c which we have already found out into BD, its own capability. Now that gives me VUS. Based on the diameter and the number of legs, calculate the value of ASV. Now we know VUS from this formula, we know ASV from this formula. Now having known this, we use this particular formula given over here, that is on page number 73. We look at this formula. VUS is already known, 0.87, Fy is already known as 415, or whatever as the case may be, grade of concrete 415 or Fe 500 or whatever. ASV is calculated over here, D is the effective depth. So having known all this, we can easily calculate the spacing of the vertical stirrups. Having got the spacing of the vertical stirrups, give a check for provision of minimum shear reinforcement as per this. That is what we have seen earlier, that is something like this. So that we do, and after that we give the check for maximum spacing. So exactly the same procedure which we are repeating in case of step 7a, that gets repeated over here at the end. So in all this, whether it is this or this or this, whatever is the least spacing, whatever is the minimum amount of spacing which we get, that spacing will be provided. So many number of legs, the vertical legs of these diameter bars at this spacing, the minimum spacing whatever we are getting in all this, that much spacing we will be prescribing. So that is going to be our design procedure.